We have Brian Berneman with us. Did I get that right, the last name?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. So, Brian, thank you for joining us today. You're the host of the podcast Conscious Action,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
I was listening to some of it, and the episode that I heard, it was about yes, we need to be aware of our earth and how we can be better stewards of it and try to undo some of the impact, the human impact that we've had on it. Just a wonderful topic that we can easily not focus our energy on. So thank you
Mm.
for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Robert. Yeah, it's really nice to be able to be here and to be able to share a little bit of what's going on in this side of the world.
Well, and you're in New Zealand, you're in Auckland,
Yeah.
and New Zealand, of course, being an island nation. My understanding is that as a response to COVID-19, it's kind of just shut down a lot of what it's doing. So,
Mm.
do you mind sharing us a little bit about what New Zealand's response has been
Yeah,
to COVID-19?
definitely. And it's been really interesting, especially like throughout this entire year, talking with my family. I'm originally from Argentina, and I
Oh,
have family in Argentina, family around Europe, and it's been really interesting talking about it because here the strategy from the beginning, from the government, it was to go hard
mhm.
and to go fast. So once it was seen that actually something like a lockdown was necessary. It was nationwide, and there were quite a lot of restrictions in terms of what we could do. Yet it was really interesting because I could still, comparing to other countries that I was talking with people from there, I could still go for a walk. I could still like go and do things that in other countries that wasn't allowed. So here, most people, and I have heard, but I'm not sure. I have heard that some people didn't respect the quarantine, but for most people, they did respect the quarantine. And as you said, this is an island nation, and one of the benefits that that had was that the government decided, okay, we're going to close the borders. That meant no new people coming into the country, except that they managed the way that new people were going to come into the country. Only New Zealanders, residents returning into the country, and everyone that need to come back and do a 2 week isolation. That in a very short amount of time, that changed into being a mandated quarantine process in a government appointed place. So the government rented out hotels, and all of the new people coming into the country were going to be there instead of doing their own thing.
Right.
So it it started to also be a little bit more that the government actually was like, okay, we're going to do it this way, and most people got on top of it. And yes, it was challenging at the beginning for a lot of people to adjust to it. In my experience, I'm really blessed that I live in a house with a garden and
Mm.
with really nice roommates or housemates actually. And it wasn't that like, I mean, I'm okay. I have a, and in my background, I practice a lot of meditation. I practice a
Mm-hmm.
lot of mindfulness and all of these different practices that for me really the lockdown time was kind of like being on retreat.
Yeah.
And it was so amazing because I was able to slow down and not to have to go anywhere, enjoying even more than usual, cooking as a house all together and enjoying times together, being able to actually have more time to talk with my family abroad.
Mm.
So that was really nice, and as well something that happened, that comparing to other countries, New Zealand was able to give a subsidy to everyone whose work was impacted by COVID, which meant then that that's something that I didn't really need to think about, because for the weeks that the lockdown took place, then I had an income. So that really made it so that I could actually, in a sense, enjoy it. So yeah, that was really interesting.
Well, and I've got to say, Brian, I mean, you definitely, and I mean this truly, that you have a very, I can see that you're at peace. The way that
Mm.
you talk, I mean, you're putting me at ease, because before I was talking, I was like, "Hey, Brian, how's
Mm.
it going?" And I can see that you must have come to a place of peace and understanding well before
Mm.
COVID-19 started. Is that correct?
Yes, I've been for the last 17 years. This
Mm.
has been my path of trying to discover and uncover myself and understand myself with different tools and different traditions of studying ancient wisdom. And yeah, this is what I do, and what I do with my work, and what I do with the Conscious Action podcast. It's all about trying to understand the ways that we can live, and the way that we can live more consciously, and the way to understand well-being from a personal, collective, and a global perspective. So understanding really, and this is part of why it's called conscious action, because the action part is really important, especially everything that has to do with the earth and relationships. So it's really about understanding, for me, that if I understand myself, I understand my relationship with you, I understand my relationship with everyone, I understand my relationship with the earth, and then my actions, I know what my actions need to be because they are informed by a deep connection. And that's something that I feel that we as society for a long time we forgot, something that most of the indigenous cultures still had at their foundation, and something that I was actually hoping that COVID would lead us there. I think it did a little bit, not to the extent that I was hoping, but it did show us, I think, that how connected everyone is, because this went everywhere in the world. And it didn't matter whether it's a rich country or a not rich country, whether the skin color or the religion or the culture, it didn't matter. This went everywhere. And getting to that place of recognizing like we're all interconnected, and how we can understand that, I think that's really interesting.
It's such a wonderful point that we come to this place of there's a split in the path, there's a fork in the road, and we've been given this new information, and we can either accept it and adapt, or we can deny it and reject it. And and we've seen a lot of kind of confrontation around the world, as well as, yes, the adaptation, that we're coming to a new place of understanding. And I think I have a very limited understanding of Buddhism and this Eastern way of thinking, but enlightenment. And first of all, enlightenment it's not a destination, it's a kind of a constant journey. And resist it as we may, but resistance is all part of, it is kind of part of acceptance, right? Because a giant boulder, it's coming, it's falling at you. You can try and push against it, but at some point, you know, it's almost oblivion to try and fight against something.
Mm.
And that's why I think there's been a lot of of angst in the world is that we're at this point where instead of, pointing our fingers, we now have to look internally, and that's the next step.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and just to say something from what you were just saying about from a Buddhist perspective about enlightenment. Yes, it's a journey to understand it, but you are already enlightened.
Mm. You're already enlightened.
Yes, that's in the Buddhist teachings. The understanding is that we are already enlightened. We're just not realizing it.
Wow.
And the journey is one of uncovering and taking off the veils that are preventing us from seeing that.
And I wear many veils.
We all do.
Yeah, I hide behind many things.
Yeah, and a lot of them, of course, most of them are unconscious. Like some of them are conscious that we're choosing, and that is the mask that we are sharing, and we are showing up in the world with different people in our lives. But the majority really is unconscious, and I do feel, as you're saying, there's a lot of different ways that we can engage with the circumstances that are happening, and a lot of it comes back, as you were saying, for me, on how am I responding to it. And one of the things that what I teach when with my courses and with my coaching is how to engage with our experience in a sense of, instead of reacting, responding. And the reacting is that automatic response that you're not even thinking about, that you don't have any say. It's just this conditioned way. Whereas if you're responding to life, you are choosing and you are conscious about what you're doing. The action might be the same, but what it's coming from, it's different. And I see this with a lot of people around the world, that there's, for example, here in New Zealand, like after a few weeks of hard lockdown, we went into a different level. So there were 4 different levels here. So level 1 to 4, and the 4 was full quarantine and isolation. And then level 3, we went into a level that some things were open and you didn't have to stay completely at home, but it was recommended. And then level 2, that only gatherings more than 100 people weren't possible. And then level 1, basically almost everything is open, and yes, take care of things, but it's kind of like, life is open for everything. And we were like blessed enough that after some weeks of doing that, then there wasn't any cases in the country, which meant that then suddenly everything opened. And from one day to the next, I was able to notice, and I talked with a lot of people, that I was able to notice how suddenly it's like, wow, I'm like, there's cars again in the road, like there's all of this noise pollution once again, and that people went back to work and to go to all of these different things that happen, just kind of like returning to a sense of normality, which I was hoping that didn't happen. Yes, of course, there needs to be, like, we need that openness and we need that freedom and we need to do things, but I was hoping that we wouldn't revert back to some of the ways and that we would move forward to some ways. And I do know that there were some learnings, of course, and for some individual people, things evolved, but here, as the majority of people just went back into work and into making money with, I mean, this is not judging, this is just the reality, understanding as well people's experiences and people's positions. A lot of People's work were impacted, a lot of places closed down. Um, so of course there's a lot of challenges, and for New Zealand the number one industry was tourism.
Mm.
So once the borders were closed, it's like, okay, like the country needs a big shift, and the government gave a lot of money injection and subsidies to the tourism industry, to be able to keep people working and to be able to keep employees still being paid and employed, and to be able to give a little bit of a shift from the tourism industry from like people from abroad to internal tourism.
Mm.
So we were able to travel. Like, I mean, it was really interesting because now, like for the last during like Christmas and the holidays, like I went to a festival with 2,000 people, and I traveled around the country and to different
Right.
beach cities, like, you know, and it's like, and at the same time I'm talking with my family and they are, you know, in an
Mm.
apartment during winter, like on the other side of the world. And it's really interesting just seeing that, and how I had some people that were saying, you know, like they felt guilty talking with their friends or family from other places because of the freedom that we're able to have here, and that in other places of the world it's not. And you know, it's been really interesting that we won't know until many years in the future what was the right response to a pandemic like this. And yet, in the moment, and for most of the year that we were able to be free and everything
Mm.
was open, here I'm really blessed, and I'm thankful for the decisions that the government made, the decisions that everyone in the country made to be able to actually make this happen, because it takes everyone to buy
Right.
into what the mandate is as well.
And I mean, kind of the solution to it, like you said, was just to shut it down. But here in Canada, they've we've really struggled. I mean, I'll speak for our experiences, not in other countries, but in Canada, we've really had a hard time shutting it down because uh, the system, you know, the financial system, it depends on certain things to stay running. And like you say, tourism was one of them here in Canada, you know, air travel, airfare. Of
Mhm.
course, that's how it came in.
Mhm.
So it's this sort of double-edged sword of, you know, what do we do?
Mhm.
And in New Zealand, they've they've made this decision to continue to shut things down.
Yeah.
And is that correct? Like there's still not flights coming in or anything like
There's
that?
there's as far as I'm aware, that's the only flights that are coming in is for people returning. I think that recently they started to open up to not only residents but to people that will be coming here for a little bit of a longer period, because anyone that is returning to the country or everyone that is coming to the country not only needs to do the 2-week mandatory quarantine beforehand, they need to have a negative test before getting into the plane. Still, they need to do that, and they need to pay for the quarantine.
Right.
So that's, I think that around $3,000 or $4,000. So that's on top of the airfare that it's already more expensive than usual. So, like for someone that actually wants to come here, if it would be someone just traveling, it's a lot of money, plus the quarantine. So it's not as easy, I would say, for people. And the government has been, as far as I'm aware, really really tough on making sure that that happened, because the idea was all of the time, like, if they can manage the borders, which is, again, New Zealand as an island is much easier than in other countries. um, if they can manage the border, and anyone that is inside of the quarantine facilities needs to have multiple negative tests, or if not, that will be extended. Then it makes it so that in the community there's no virus. And there was some weeks ago, actually, one of the people that left the quarantine facility, I think that 1 week afterwards, she tested positive, and it was the first positive test outside of a quarantine facility in months. And it was interesting seeing the response, and it was actually um, quite quite effective, because the person that did have the positive test, she actually was using her phone to every place that she went, and every place has like the QR um, and thing to actually check in. So it was super easy to do the contact tracing for every place that this person went, and she was proactive into actually communicating and actually going to take the test and doing so. Like it was really fast that they were able to test everyone that it was. They did a contact tracing and testing that, and then realizing, okay, it didn't spread, so then everything remained open. And I think that is one of the things here, is that we are doing, I think that the amount of decisions that the government made, plus people in the country buying into it, the majority of people, of course, there's always people against the decisions and against this.
Of course. That's
but
anywhere.
yeah, but as a majority, I think that people realize that, do I want to have perhaps no freedom of traveling outside, because I don't know if I will be able to come back, or or am I okay not having that and being able to live here freely inside of the country? So there's all of these different things that different people need to wage, and I think that like at the end of the day, the government made some decisions, and the government here is in a position that not a lot of governments around the world are, saying, like, we are again an island nation. As a country, it's a rich country, so it's able to actually support its citizens.
Right.
So it's not just like, if it's a country that cannot do that, then people need to go and work. So there's spread of the virus and things like that if people are not able to stay home. Here, people stayed home.
Right.
So that helped.
And that is something that I've talked to people about, is this interconnectedness, ribosomes, if you will, that, every blade of grass, there's this ecosystem that runs underneath that connects them all. And for what you're describing is that you were able to kind of, as a nation, sort of do your own thing, whereas others like America and the United States, Canada and the United States, there's this, we're almost, we're inseparable, right? At least in this moment in time.
Yeah.
Which is kind of going into what you talk about of consciousness and what's next. I mean, you saw this as an opportunity to look inwards, and you're hoping that would be a little bit longer sustained. What do you think are we are changed forever by this. And what do you think will be the results of this? Will people be living more mindfully or less mindfully as a result?
Well, I think that there's different things in here, because I don't think that this is only just COVID. I think that this is part of the evolution and part of the times that we're in. Yet I do think that COVID is one of the aspects from where we all, like as you say, like this is a pivotal time in in our lifetime, in civilization's lifetime. And there's a lot of learnings. I do think that a lot of people understood more what's important, what actually matters. I think that there's going to be a lot of, as we mentioned before, like a lot of that going in and questioning. And the thing with this that I find really interesting is that for me, the path of change and the path of going in and questioning, it's not always a pleasant one for the person, and also it's not pleasant one as society, because when we look within and we stop and we actually notice, wait, this isn't right, like, and then they will start and to be even more than what already has been happening in the last few years of having groups of people that were either neglected or that were put down or that were marginalized actually starting to rise up and say this isn't right, and other people that we are seeing that is not right, then we're going to support that. So there's going to be for quite a while, I think, a lot of changes that are not pleasant, a lot of protests, a lot of different things like we've seen with the Black Lives Matter movement, with the Me Too movement even before. I do think that there's going to be even more and more and more of that, because we are realizing that what we've been experiencing, it's not normal. It's not normal that, like for me to be able to have the life that I have, that there's someone around the world that is suffering and that is not able to live and eat and drink water because me wanting to potentially buy a t-shirt that is cheap,
Yes.
And the impact that is having on people and on people, especially talking about that, for example, like the fashion industry, like every single piece of clothing that we buy, like the impact that it has on people and the environment is huge. And like I always, when I'm talking about this, and this one of the topics that I talk about, is the fashion revolution. It's understanding, like if I open my eyes to the cost of a t-shirt, it's like, like someone needs to grow the cotton. Ideally, the cotton is organic. When most of the world it's not. Already, if it's not organic, there's a huge impact in the environment. Then someone needs to actually gather it, turn it into the fabric, make it into a t-shirt. That's people most likely in Bangladesh, in Malaysia, in India, or in somewhere in Southeast Asia, that they are paid pennies. So they are not even making a living wage. There's like child working there. And then there's the cost of shipping that to the other side of the world, selling it, the taxes. If I think of all of that just from like a monetary standpoint, how is it that a t-shirt can be $5? Just the shipping of something needs to be way more than that. So that meant that someone didn't get paid. The environmental aspect impact is huge. So if I start, to think about these things, and I have the time and the space to think, which is what I believe that COVID gave us, and the ones that we used that time, and that we were blessed enough to not have challenges with our health, not have challenges with our financial situation. If we didn't have both of those challenges, having the time to actually notice, like, how am I living my life? What am I doing? Am I going to work to make money on a mindless work that has no meaning for me, that actually is not adding anything to anyone really, and I'm unhappy? Why am I doing that? Like, and it doesn't mean that everything needs to change now. It just means that I'm able to have the time and the space to question and to think. And I think that, for a lot of people, especially for those that were impacted with someone in their lives dying, then we realize much more clearly what is important. And what is important usually is our health, our connections, our family, our friends, other people. It's not so much making money.
Mm.
And how are we going to be able to shift the model and the system of our societies to be able to engage in a way that actually makes sense and actually takes everyone into account? Because like, as you were saying before, like, this is from everywhere in the world. People were impacted, and like, one of the things that this is my way of talking about it is like, I don't care how the virus came to be.
Mm.
I don't even entertain the idea. It's not something that I'm going to solve. It's not something that I want to put my energy into.
Right.
All that I care is that there is something that is impacting everyone
Yeah.
in
Here we
different
are.
ways. Yeah, and what are we going to do? What are we going to learn? And what are we going to actually change? And can we use this as an opportunity? Because, a lot of times it's like people want to go back to normal. Normal wasn't working.
Yeah.
Like, and
Normal was
normal, no,
insanity.
yeah.
Normal was insanity.
And yes, perhaps for some people, they had an amazing life. But when we start to understand, like, we're all one, we're connected.
Yeah.
Like, if someone else is dying, like, things are not right. So it's that, like, let's not go back to a normal. Let's go back to a better world.
Yes. Well, I, as I was just listening to you speak, I mean, you brought to mind this idea of materialism and
Mm,
this sick marriage, this codependent marriage of materialism, which is an independent thing, my addiction to material, and to capitalism.
mm,
And this idea of people are always being exploited by the capitalist system. That's how it works, like you say. And it's also how we've gotten to where we are today. I mean, the the consequence of it is that we're here because of the people that we've stepped on to get to where we are, and every civilization has done that. And can we get to a place where we can all live with equity and equality? Is that
mm.
possible?
Well, I do believe that it's possible. Super
Mm-hmm.
challenging, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we are the capitalist system. Like, yes, it's a construct, but also we are part of it, which means that we are also allowing it to continue.
Yes, I am
And
allowing it to continue.
yeah, and this is not about judging, and I don't judge
Mm-hmm.
what came before. What came before, now we're able to see where we are
We're
based on
here
what
now.
came before.
We're
So
here
it's not
now.
about judging, it's about recognizing that had its place, and a lot of amazing things came from that, but this is not longer serving us. So can we see a way
Mm-hmm.
forward, as you're saying, that is going to actually bring environmental justice, social justice, equity, and equality? Because those are the ways that we can move forward. And I do think that consciousness is rising. More people are waking up. Whether we talk about it on a spiritual or non-spiritual way, I don't care about that. And for me, I connect on it on a spiritual way, but it doesn't need to be.
You're right.
Consciousness is rising because we are more connected through the internet. We're more connected with the understanding of what's happening, and by doing that, then we can actually start to make decisions. And a lot of times, I think, this starts from ourselves. As at the very beginning, you mentioned something that I talk about a lot, that is taking personal responsibility and stewardship, understanding what is your role here, what do you believe in, what do you stand for, and how are you going to show up for yourself and for others. And understanding, the more that we understand our connection, the others, it's quite a big group of people. It's 8 billion people. So
Yeah.
how am I showing up for everyone? And of course, I'm one person. You are one person. We cannot change everything yet. I can change myself.
Right.
If I change myself, by changing myself, I start to change the people around me.
Yeah.
And that's the ripple effect that we need when we start to understand that I don't need to change everything. I just need to change me. And by doing that, everything will change. Because if 8 billion people change themselves, then we all change.
Right.
So we can get to that place. And, I always think there is a big take on equality and equity, and from people that we are more fortunate and we have been blessed with whatever happened in the past, then my position here, I can understand that it's one of privilege.
Mm-hmm.
I am not one of the most privileged people in the people, but I still understand that, I have a computer, I have internet, I'm talking to you, I have a roof on top of my head. I'm privileged.
Yeah.
So if I understand that I have that, then I can understand, okay, what am I doing with that privilege? And what I can do is different than what you can do and what other people can do. What I care about is different than what you care about. So if someone cares more about, their local community and their focus is on food, and trying to make sure that everyone has food security, then focus on that. If for the other person it is about understanding, like it's about social justice, then focus on that. If for another one it's about organic and not more chemical grown things, then focus on that. Whatever lights you up, that is what you're supposed to be doing. And we're all different. So it's not about getting everyone to be the same. It's about making everyone realize that you're unique. What are you going to bring to the table?
Well, as a registered clinical counselor, I tell kids, don't be cool, just be yourself. I mean, that's a cool, that's the best thing in the world. By you being yourself, whatever that is, you find your purpose, you will impact the world and encourage others to do the same. And like you said, you find out what your goal is in the now, you work on that goal, and who's to say that it won't change?
It will change.
It will change. I mean, we're not static creatures. Our book is always being written, and maybe some believe that the book has, all has been written, but for us living, part of existence is as we live, our book is being written. So always thinking about that. And the crazy thing is we have our individual books, but there's also, we're at this point in time, as you mentioned, that we are all 1 in 8 billion writing the same story right now at the same time. And things like the internet are awakening us to how the system that connects us.
Yes.
And that there's the other piece of living authentically. And therein does lie the danger of, in my experiences in Western culture, there's competition and then there's cooperation. And in order to get to where we are today, there had to have been some cooperation, right? If it was just, me, then the others wouldn't exist, right? So there's always been a dance. But where we are now, to me, competition feeds the disease of mental insecurity. At least it has for me. But cooperation, when you win, I win, and when I win, you win.
Yeah.
That's the key to happiness.
Yes, definitely. And like for me, one of with conscious action, I always talk about our 4 main pillars, and our 4 main pillars is connection, collaboration, celebration, and compassion. Yes, like the not only now and the past, but most importantly, the future is about collaboration. It's about understanding that we are all connected, and that if you win, I win, and if the other person wins, I win.
Yeah.
As you were just saying, this every single decision that I make for myself and for my business, I'm thinking all of the time, how can I make this a win-win situation? A win-win-win-win-win-win
Yeah.
situation. Taking into account all of the stakeholders, including the earth, including the local communities of where I'm operating, including all of the people that are attached, all of the suppliers, all of their customers, all of the people that are attached, all of the people that come to my events, all of the people that are listening to my podcast. How can I make this something that everyone is winning? And if everyone is winning, then I'm winning.
Yeah, I mean, that's and even in the sense of winning, it's like success, right? Like if you're doing what you really believe in, I mean, and I've said the golden rule is that you're making the choice to have others make choices, not I'm choosing to take away other people's choices. And that has been the system since, time immemorial, that we've had certain people who have decided to take away other people's choices. And again, there's this piece of privilege. I am incredibly privileged. But privilege isn't something like, shame. It's about what can I do with what I'm given, right?
Exactly.
Gratitude and action.
Yes, definitely. And like there's one of the interesting things with that conversation, I think it's a huge conversation, understanding privilege and understanding how to bring justice into what happened before, is understanding, as you were saying, what are the actions that I'm going to take, and how far am I willing to go to have reparations and to bring on equality and to bring on equity. And that is a really important, and it's a huge topic in on itself, but it's really important. I think that it's something that for these times, like it's, except New Zealand and perhaps a few other places in the world that most things are open, everyone is in a position that there's time to rethink a lot of things. How do we want to, for me, I'm looking at how do we want 2025 to look, because things don't change from one day to the next. Like there's a process, there's time, and there's starting back again and on and getting all of these new ideas and all of these new changes and all of these new ways to integrate with what's already happening. So I'm looking at what is my vision like in 2025. My vision is one that I'm hoping that there's much more connection, much more collaboration, much more emphasis on local communities and connection of people, bringing back that sense of community, because that is something that we forgot with individualism, and the importance of it. And actually, by making sure that each and every single community is self-sufficient and self-reliant, with a cooperation with the other communities, and that acting local and thinking global, that is one of the ways that we're going to move forward. Like how many like more t-shirts do we need?
Yeah.
Like
Materialism again.
yeah,
right?
can we grow? Like I grow here in the garden some food. I go like now after the talk, I'm going to go to the farmers market here to get from the local farmer the rest of my food. Like can I rely on just my community and not like not going to a supermarket or not going to buy something that comes from half way around the world? And it's not about like that's not good. It's just that can we survive with what we have here? And not only survive, can we thrive with what is here? And understand what's the impact of bringing something from the other side of the world here. especially something that already grows here.
Yeah, yeah.
If it's something that doesn't grow here, I could understand it potentially. But, like bringing some lemons when there's lemons growing here, and like, why? Yes,
Right.
there's a lot of places around the world that there's shortage of food and a lot of food doesn't grow there. So of course those places do need to have that. Just understanding, this each community, each place has uniqueness built into them. So taking care of that, and it's looking at it from different perspectives. I think a lot of times, like when I do my work, I bring up the Sustainable Development Goals from the UN. They are not perfect, but it's a framework to actually see how we are acting and what's the impact of our choices, as well as the donut economic system as well. I think that when we have those systems in place to actually understand, it's like, okay, if I do this, the impact is going to be there, and there. Like, then is that the correct action or not?
Right.
And it's much easier to see when I actually have at the forefront these views.
Now, the sense of again getting back to our roots and being here and now and living in the world around us is a key to not only sustainability but to stabilizing our mental wellness. And I've had this conversation with a friend of mine, and I can be quite an idealist, quite a romanticist, and an optimist, all wonderful things. And my buddy has reminded me that there will always be bad actors. There will always be people that will try and exploit. And it becomes a question of what do we do with them? How do we encourage them?
I don't believe that there's bad actors.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that everyone believes that they are the good actor.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that because of our disconnection and because of the way that we've been separating everything, we created this polarization. And like my belief is that even the people that are killing, the people that are taking advantage of others, they are doing it because they think that they are doing something right. They're
justified.
Good.
Yeah.
It's not even justified. It's they believe that what they are doing is the right thing to do. Just the same as when a country is going to war, they believe that they are protecting. They are not, it's not about sometimes, even though we might like it is somewhere there. It's about killing that. It's about protection. It's about doing what we think that is right. And if
It's the
someone,
ego.
well, partly yes, and partly it's the understanding that it's that separation that
Yes.
it's like it's this. It's like like what's a country like, and why do we have patriotism? Like what makes like I lived in I lived in Argentina, I lived in the US, I lived in different places in Europe, I live now here in New Zealand, like. And I found that in some places, the sense of patriotism is way more prevalent than in other places. And that like shapes some of the decisions. And if I think, like there's this land here needs to be protected and it's precious, which is perfectly okay to think that. What I'm also thinking is, anyone that is not this, then it's dangerous.
We
And it's
other. We
yeah,
other. Othering.
yeah, and othering actually polarizes us and creates that difference. So, I think that the more that we can start to connect, the less that is going to become a problem, and the more that we start sharing, the less that's going to become a problem. Because the problem with this is that as countries and societies, there's rich ones, there's the haves and there's the have-nots, whether this is as a country or inside of the country. And if we keep on dividing the haves with the have-nots, then that's always going to be a problem because, like we're creating that separation. Whereas the reality is that there's abundance. You know, like, there's enough food nowadays, not even thinking of what we could potentially grow in the future. There's now enough food to feed 20 billion people. And there's billions of people going hungry today. And the food that we are growing today is enough for 20 billion people, but we are throwing it away. And
Yeah.
it's not distributed well. You know, like, there's people that have billions and trillions of dollars, and there's people that don't even have 1 cent. So it's not about a, a lack of resources. It's not about a lack of
It's
abundance.
how
It's
it's
about
distributed.
distribution.
Yeah.
So the more that we start to understand actually the impact of someone not having, how that impacts the ones that do have, then until we keep on realizing that and we realize the connection, then things are going to continue being challenging. But I think that we're waking up to that. Then we're waking up to understand, you know, like, if something happens potentially in a remote market, in a remote village somewhere in the world, that can actually impact you on the other side of the world, in your business, in your health, in your family, you know. And it's like, okay, so how do we prevent this? Well, we could prevent this by actually making sure that everyone in the world has enough, that there is actually a better distribution, there's equality, there's social justice, and that we're able to understand that, which is what we've been talking, is when we understand this connection, then I understand, you know, like, that's for me as well.
Right.
So it's a challenge, and I think that it's a consciousness change, a mentality change, a system change. And I do have, as you were mentioning before, I do have a sense of idealism and positivism, but also I'm a realist.
Yeah.
So I mix both things, and I understand, you know, next year, like, all these things are not going to be solved, yet we can move in that direction. And the more people that wake up to doing that, the more people that wake up to going in to question and to connect with themselves, and from there connect to others, then we're moving in the right direction. And it might take generations. Hopefully not. Hopefully in our generation we can solve this, because if also we don't solve this, COVID is going to be the least of our problems with climate change. So, like, that's another big conversation that, you know, needs to happen. That it's part of these times, and it's part of, you know, seeing these connections. Like, if there's like something that changes from somewhere in the world, then we're already seeing in a lot of places there's climate refugees already.
Yes.
There's going to be a huge displacement of people if we don't change our ways. So understanding just that is like, the more that we understand what's actually going on, the more that we understand that there is a way to change it.
Well, it's so interesting that you bring up, how fictional so much of this is. The amount of money that exists does not physically exist in the world. And we're starting to wake up to the fact that we're living in a fictional story. We're living in a fictional story, and that there are people, myself included, who have taken more than we need. The fact that I've had food go bad in my home should be the biggest wake up call to me. The fact that I have shirts that have dust on them should be a wake up call to me, right? And I am getting to this point of, what do I really need? This sense of utility, of what really serves me versus what am I kind of holding on to. And it's not like, again, it's not a shameful thing. It's almost bemusing, this sort of, this lie we've bought with comfort. Comfort isn't truth.
Yeah, you know, I think that what you're raising just now, there's a few things that I want to touch on. One is
Yeah.
like it's really important not to judge ourselves
Yes, I
and
agree.
not to be tough on ourselves because of my previous ignorance or what I wasn't noticing.
It's moving forward.
Yeah, and it's like from that, it's like, you know, like I woke up to the fact that, you know, I did in the past like waste food, and now I know I don't waste
Yeah.
any food at all. I buy what I know that I'm going to eat. I plan accordingly, and I eat it all. I don't allow it to go bad. If I have anything, I compost it, so I don't allow anything to go to the rubbish bin. I haven't put anything in the last 2.5 years in the rubbish bin. Like
Whoa,
I don't make any
that's
personal
amazing.
rubbish. And you know, like if I do it, anyone can do it. It's just
Sure.
understanding.
Yeah.
It's just understanding, you know, like I understand my impact, I understand my actions, and I have, as I mentioned before, I've been doing this for the last 17 years, living really consciously. So in a lot of senses, I'm way ahead than what I was 17 years ago. So it's not about comparing, it's not about judging. Yet I understand, you know, like, oh, I woke up to that. Like for example, like I have a lot of books here. Like I love books.
Me too.
So like there's no like I don't have any issue with having books. Yet I am completely open to sharing them. And I do think that the
Mm.
sharing economy is one of the most important things because, like, you know, like I already have this t-shirt. Like, I, like, what can I do so that it actually has use, especially if I don't use it that much? And it's like, okay, I can donate it or I can sell it, whatever I just did it, or I can actually engage in, there's a lot and more of sharing economy, Airbnb, Uber, or other the car share like riding apps. Like there's here in New Zealand, for example, there's like during lockdown, there's a business that started for sharing tools or sharing anything that you have in your house. So if you have a hammer or like, you know, like having like tools libraries, like the
Mm.
more that we understand that, like, you know, like we can share, like, I don't know in like when over there where you live, but like, you know, here, like I live surrounded with other houses, right? Each house like most likely has its own dishwasher, has its own washing machine, has its own lawnmower. It's like, do we need all of that? Like, and then each one, like, whenever something breaks and stuff, using that one, they will get a new one. Instead of repairing it, they will get a new one. And it's just not about judging. This is the way that our
Yes.
society is telling us how to do things. But it's like, can we stop and can we start sharing a little bit more? And understanding, you know, like this is something from a pandemic perspective that I personally don't agree with. I do see its value, but not completely, is the isolation. We need to be connected to others. The sense
Yes.
of community for our well-being is so important to be able to keep my immune system
Mm.
in a high place. I need connection with other human beings. That is why giving hugs is such an important thing, and it's recommended to have a minimum of 8 hugs per day with
Really?
people. Yeah, the amount of like all of like I don't want to get
Yeah.
too much into what
But the
happens.
oxytocin
Yeah,
and
the amount of oxygen. So like, you know, to be able to get to the minimum place of happiness, to the minimum, like it's recommended to have 8 hugs a day. So we need that connection with people. You know, like why is it that for centuries it has been the biggest punishment in the world, sending people in prison to isolation? Because the most important thing that we have is this connection.
Yes.
And yes, I can feel that connection now with you, yet when we have it in person, it's in a different level.
Right.
So I understand the importance for the pandemic on one perspective on isolating ourselves, but when that starts to be in a long amount of time. For people that live by themselves, especially, the impact that is going to have, or that it's already having, on people's mental well-being is huge. And what it's going to have it's an impact in the future, it might be even more. So it's a very interesting thing, because we need to do something to avoid the medical system to be overloaded.
Yes. Yeah.
Yet when that is not happening, we how do we deal with going back to connection? And as I said before, like in New Zealand, we are blessed that everything is open, so we are able to have this connection. I'm like, as I said, I went to a festival. I'm going in a few weeks to another festival with some few thousand people. Like, it's like talking to other people around the world. This is like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, but that's
like,
awesome.
Yeah, and and I know, like, I was talking with my friend and that lives in London, and I told him, like, and I'm going to go to the festival, and I'm going to connect with everyone, and I'm going to dance my ass off because you can't. So I'm going to
I'm going to do it for you.
For everyone that
for
is
the
not
world.
able to. Understanding, as I talked before about privilege, understanding the privilege that I have, I'm going to make the most out of this situation, because not everyone is able to.
Dude, that's awesome. There's a point when you're talking, and this is just, it was like, I'm not saying that this is what your house smells like, but I was smelling incense. You know, that like that therapeutic smell? And I was like,
I have the incense there.
But isn't that like, dude, I legitimately was smelling that. And I was like, man, I feel like so, calm right now. So I want to thank you for your time. And I mean,
Yeah.
I would love to speak to you again, Brian. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Rob. Yeah, and all the best for what's happening over there in Canada, and for you, and I do hope that everyone that is listening to this, that they, if they haven't yet, that they can actually think of what they've been learning, and I always encourage everyone to think of what is one action that you can take. What is one action? Like, forgetting about everything, just what is your next action? So if you like realize something, put that into action.
The power of intent, why, and that one action. And when you focus on it, you tap into the intent of, why am I doing this?
Yeah. And not to be overburdened by the idea that, I need to change everything. It's just like step by step.
What's the one thing?
And I could walk really fast, or I could walk slow, but step by step.
One thing that I'm working on daily is taking time, developing that relationship with myself of 30 minutes, just quiet meditation. And like you say, it's not about being perfect. It's just, what's that one thing you can do? So
yeah.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much.
Definitely.
Okay. And you take care.
Yeah.